Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I have a thought. Should I try this again? Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I have a thought that I am kind of excited to share with you guys, an insight, as I've done a deep dive recently into the history of the eye, how the eye was created. I've started by just having an interest in what was going on with the eyelid, and apparently that's kind of crazy. Like, I guess this makes sense, but you only have a muscle pulling your eyelids up. Otherwise, you relax, it goes down. But it certainly feels like you can scrunch, but that's like the muscles around the face. Anyway, that's just a teaser of the fun types of facts we're going to be going over in this video as I put forth a hypothesis for why so many people report seeing a bright light when they have a near-death experience.
Do you see a light, Homer?
Yes?
Move into the light, my son.
I did go looking to see whether somebody else had this idea. It's by no means an exhaustive investigation, but every time I found an article that was titled, "Why do we see bright lights before we die?" they failed to actually provide the why. They just said that. And so this was at least true in my findings. So what I learned about the history of the eye that gives me this insight into why this might be happening in near-death experiences. So the earliest iterations of eyes, you might know or be able to presume, were just single cell photoreceptor cells. So they would have just been this, single cell and then, maybe a clump of cells that are sensitive to light. And over time, because if you have that, you basically just have are you facing light or are you not facing light? So over time, it would recess. And I'll show something on screen that shows this process. But as there's a cavity that kind of forms the proto-eye socket, there's shadows that get cast on those photoreceptors. So even just, even just anywhere you're looking, you're going to have a particularly bright spot, you're going to have some shadow information, and even though that's a very rudimentary sort of image, it is nonetheless pretty much the most basic image that any animal had. And some animals kind of still have this. If they're small enough, they'll have some photoreceptor cells, but they have a little bit of shadow, and they can kind of see this movement, which is a couple of patches of light moving around. Maybe you already see where this is going. So over time, not only was there a larger recess of the eye cavity, more photoreceptor cells, but a lot of organisms, from reptiles to mammals, birds, developed a lens in the front, a lens that would be able to focus the light in. And this was likely done by first having there be this type of natural material that forms, and then kind of filling it with water. The eye is moist, and that filling with water kind of created the pocket, the convex and concave curve of the lens that actually focuses the light back onto those photoreceptive cells in the back. Other advancements in the development of the eye include eyelashes to keep away extra dirt, eyelids to generally protect the eye, and also be able to kind of help us regulate our own sense of reality. So not only does it help us sleep by shutting off what, for humans at least, is 80% of our sensory input, which comes from our eyes, but also, and this is really cool once you look for it, the way that people blink even has a pattern to it. People literally blink at certain precise times. If you they've done a study in the movie theater with cameras trained on everybody's eyes, and at any one moment, 40% of people are blinking at the same time. Although that changes person to person, it'll happen at moments where there's a natural division in the storytelling. Something you can try right now is if you look to the left, and then you look at something to the right, and then you look back. I swear that I did not try to do that. That is just an unconscious reaction. When you look back over the same information, your brain is like, okay, I've already seen this. Let's segment, let's blink. So that fact actually is what got me kickstarted into the development of the eye in the first place. So let's break it down a little bit. So when people are dying, a lot of things are going on. It's not completely understood. I certainly don't understand all of it, but it does seem like there's a lot of good research that there's, a lot of brain activity while we're dying. Our brain is hitting us with memories. That's the whole light flashing before your eyes. It's hitting us with all sorts of different chemicals. I guess even a little DMT, people say, and so there's a hallucinatory effect to some degree. But as the brain actually dies, systems sort of shut down in order of importance, which is interestingly very correlated to order of evolutionary development, right? So like the first thing to shut down in the brain is going to be like consciousness, which is very late in the development. And it's going to be last to shut down core features like regulating breathing or like brain activity or whatever. So what might we surmise from this? Again, this is a hypothesis. I'd be interested if it could be tested in some way because, like, for example, are people more likely to report the bright light thing when they're literally in a room that has bright lights? Or are people still seeing the bright light thing when they're dying in a dark room? But what I feel like is true of a lot of people who die, they die in hospital rooms or hospice rooms, which may not be the most brightly lit, but they are lit. You want to see what's going on. So there's always going to be a light source where people are dying for the most part. So it's very easy to imagine that as our brain starts to shut down, before it's fully shut down, but after our visual cortex, which is in the back of our brain and also kind of developed a little later, right, starts to get less perfect information. Even though we still have the camera eyes that have the lens, that hardware, it could literally just be that there's a moment where things start to fade and our ability to actually recognize things in front of us recedes to an earlier evolutionary state where our eye receptors were simply just noting the motion or even mere existence of light around us. So as our vision goes from being, I interpret this thing and that thing, it becomes a little bit more like when we were a baby, just this wash, but that wash is potentially interpreted as brightness as a combination of there possibly being, in a lot of cases as people are dying, literally bright lights to help with the medical stuff, and also a surge in some of these chemicals, dopamine, whatever, that's going to cause more of a sympathetic reaction to the environment rather than, some sort of inward parasympathetic one. I say that because when I was a baby, like to the extent that I have memories from that time, there's like more like a blackness or like a swirl of color rather than like bright lightness. So I imagine that it can't just be the existence of light and a simplified, photoreceptor thing. There has to also maybe be this surge, but nonetheless, kind of cool to think about, right? Because literally the most primitive ways that our eyes were able to perceive things is very similar to what people experience their brains sort of potentially reverting back to in near-death experiences or similar experiences like pilots, experiencing high G forces and then having things that are very similar to near-death experiences. So I hope you guys found this video interesting. Maybe it's a little insightful. I am especially interested if you know more than I do and you can help elucidate some of these things in the comments. That's really awesome. I'm an armchair scientist, so, these are musings. But I hope they are enjoyable musings. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Remember, it's just a thought, but I want to hear yours down below. All have a good day. See you next time.